On the 20th of October, 2003, at Detroit Public Safety Headquarters, the solemn auditorium turned into the stage of a shocking revelation. While Deputy Chief Doyle delivered his report, Sergeant Maya Robinson suddenly rose from her seat. Calm but resolute, she strode to the front row and yanked open Doyle's coat, exposing a thick hidden file. Papers spilled onto the chair, revealing years of shady transactions. In full view of the oversight board and dozens of officers, Maya raised the documents high and played a recording Doyle's unmistakable voice negotiating with organized crime. The room fell silent, then erupted. What began as a routine meeting became a courtroom of truth, marking the start of a fierce battle between one courageous whistleblower and the deep corruption gripping Detroit. Before we dive deeper together into this mysterious journey, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on Justice Voice and turn on the notification bell. That way, every thrilling and surprising story will always reach you first. If you have ever walked into a government building before, the day has quite warmed up. You know the sound of it. The vents breathe. The fluorescent lights buzz like tired bees. The coffee is strong but not fancy, poured into foam cups with the department seal stamped in blue. Detroit Public Safety Headquarters felt that way on a Monday in late October, the kind of morning when the sky hangs low and the city keeps its coat on. Officers in pressed uniforms took their places on the long rows of wooden seats that looked as if they had been borrowed from a high school auditorium, each seat polished smooth by years of briefings, promotions, and scoldings nobody cared to remember out loud. They were all there. Veteran sergeants with silver hair and knuckles like lug nuts, rookies who still checked their dress shoes for scuffs and practiced their salutes in the reflection of the exit signs, detectives with the quiet eyes of people who had seen too much, and dotted among them, members of the city's oversight board, wearing respectable suits and the expression of people who had left classrooms, law offices, and neighborhood councils to keep watch over a department that had never been simple. At the front of the room, the flag stood a little to the right of center. Beside it, the seal of the city. And in the middle, a podium with a built-in microphone that popped when you breathed on it. Behind the podium, Deputy Chief Thomas Doyle waited, a tall man whose uniform seemed to carry him rather than the other way around. He had that practiced half smile some leaders wear in rooms where they feel at home. Close enough to shake hands. Far enough to remain untouched. A few minutes before the hour, Sergeant Maya Robinson slipped into a seat halfway down the middle aisle. She moved easily, the way those who run toward sirens learn to move when they are not running at all. Her uniform was neat because her mother had taught her that neatness was a form of respect. On her left lapel, the black ribbon from the summer's funeral still sat, a small strip of cloth that had faded to soft charcoal. She touched it with her thumb without thinking, a gesture that lived somewhere between prayer and habit. The auditorium filled the way a lake fills quietly, steadily, until the surface looks calm and complete. Maya glanced around at familiar faces. Lieutenant Mark Delaney near the aisle, hands folded, his expression steady and unreadable. Officer Jalen Price on the far side, tall and sharp, whispering with two other young officers, his jaw set a little too tight, as if he were trying on the seriousness of older men. At the back, a woman from the local paper, Carla Jimenez, adjusted a small camera in her lap. She was supposed to be there. Public meetings were public, after all. Still, her presence felt like a bookmark in a book everyone pretended not to be reading. It was October the 20th, the kind of date that sounds plain until history circles it in red. The city was 2 pay periods from Thanksgiving. On the east side, maples were throwing down their last brave handfuls of red. Over in Corktown, Maya's mother had woken before dawn to start the soup at the diner, the way she had every weekday for as long as Maya could remember. If you had asked Maya that morning what she wanted most, she might have said something easy. Time to sit with her mother, a meal without the radio cracking bad news, a Sunday where the pews felt like a refuge and not a reminder that troubles have long shadows. But some wants must wait their turn. The gavel tapped once, then twice. The chair of the oversight board, Evelyn Brooks, called the session to order in that calm, teacherly way that told a room full of adults they were expected to behave. Routine business. Quarterly results. A few commendations. Some talk of budgets and training hours. The sort of agenda that lets a department exhale. Doyle took his place at the podium and cleared his throat, and the microphone did that little pop. He smiled, his half-smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, and the rhythm of a familiar speech ran out across the auditorium like a well-worn carpet. Crime numbers, trending lines, partnerships with the community, overtime reduction, equipment upgrades. The words were not lies, not exactly. Numbers do not lie so much as they look away from what they do not wish to count. People nodded. A few scribbled notes because that is what you do in official meetings. Maya listened with the patience of someone who has learned to hear not only what is said but what is left out. She felt the weight of the small recorder in her jacket pocket, not because she planned to use it in the room, no, not yet, but because carrying it had become part of how she breathed. In the quiet hours these past months, when streets cooled and porch lights came on one by one, she had listened to another voice, a voice she could not unhear. It was the voice of a friend whose name was read under a folded flag that summer, a good officer, a straight arrow, the sort of man older folks in the neighborhood liked to call son even if he was not theirs. He had left behind more than a widow and a folded flag. He had left questions. He had left a line of breadcrumbs that did not belong in a city ledger. Maya shifted slightly, as if to ease a knot in her shoulder. A shaft of light had found its way through a high window and laid a pale stripe across the aisle. Dust floated in it, slow and peaceful, ignorant of human schedules. Her eyes moved from that light to the coat draped over the back of a chair near the front row. It was an expensive coat, dark and heavy, the sort men buy after they have forgotten how much clothes cost. It belonged to the deputy chief. He had shrugged it off when he reached the podium, casual, confident, the way a man lays down something he has no reason to guard. She thought of her mother's hands, small and strong, scrubbing a skillet, of the smell of onions browning, of a church hymn that promised mercy. She thought of the oath she had spoken when she pinned her badge, the simple old words that many hear and a few carry. She remembered a conversation on a stoop in July, when the heat made the air hard to breathe, and a good man had said, "If anything happens, promise me you'll tell the truth." There are promises that stay with you like a beat in the blood. Doyle's voice rolled on, smooth as a paved road in a campaign ad. Applause rose now and then, polite, practiced. Somewhere, a pen clicked. Somewhere, a chair squeaked and settled again. Somewhere, under the layers of civic order and ordinary courtesy, another sound gathered itself, a sound like the first snap of ice on a river that has been holding too long. Maya folded her hands and let her breathing slow. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to keep company with it. The clock above the back doors ticked softly. The second hand swept past 12. Evelyn Brooks looked down the agenda. The deputy chief turned a page of his prepared remarks. In another 5 minutes, the room would be released to coffee and chatter and the relief of routine. 5 minutes can be a lifetime. She rose. SEO title and tags. Detroit Police Auditorium Drama, a Whistleblower's October Morning. Keywords. Detroit Police Corruption Story. Whistleblower Cop Fiction. Moral Courage. Oversight Board. American Audiobook Storytelling. Image prompt for thumbnail or mid-story illustration. A spacious Detroit Police Headquarters auditorium on a gray October morning. Rows of worn wooden seats. Diverse officers in pressed uniforms. An American flag near a podium. Fluorescent lights humming. A determined black female sergeant standing mid-aisle. Calm but resolute. Muted autumn palette. Cinematic realism. High detail. When Sergeant Maya Robinson rose, it was not loud or dramatic. Her chair made the faintest scrape, but the silence that followed was sharper than any noise. Dozens of heads turned toward her, curiosity mixing with unease. Deputy Chief Thomas Doyle stood at the podium mid-sentence, speaking about community partnerships, and his voice stumbled for just a beat before finding its rhythm again. Maya walked steadily down the aisle, her boots clicking softly against the floor. Every step felt deliberate, practiced. She had promised herself she would not tremble, and so far her body obeyed. "Sergeant Robinson," Doyle said into the microphone, voice firm but tinged with irritation, "please take your seat. You'll have your chance when the floor is opened." She did not answer. She kept moving until she reached the front row. Doyle's coat was draped over a chair, dark wool, expensive, the kind of garment that said comfort and authority. In one swift motion, she seized it by the lapel and yanked it open. A thick file slipped from the lining and landed on the wooden seat with a smack that echoed through the auditorium. Gasps broke the air. One officer half rose, then froze. Others craned their necks. The oversight board members leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Maya lifted the file high. Her voice rang clear. "These are records. Years of hidden transactions, protection deals, and money funneled straight into Deputy Chief Doyle's accounts." Doyle's face drained of color, then flushed crimson. He took a step forward, his hand reaching. "This is outrageous. Those documents are fabricated." But his denial was cut short by the small device Maya placed on the podium. She pressed play. The speakers filled with his voice. There was no mistaking it. Calm, measured, the same cadence the room had been hearing all morning. Only here he was bargaining with Leonard Russo, arranging support in exchange for envelopes of cash, promising protection for shipments that would never see a customs inspection. The room fell silent. Not polite silence, not hesitation, but the silence of realization, when truth arrives like a blow and everyone feels its weight. Then the uproar came. Some officers stood, shouting to confiscate the evidence. Others called for calm. One young recruit whispered, "Oh God," as though praying. Several men and women stared at their shoes, unable to meet one another's eyes. Evelyn Brooks, chair of the board, struck her gavel against the desk. "Order! This is still a formal session." Her voice carried the authority of a woman who had controlled unruly classrooms for decades. Doyle lunged toward the recorder, but Lieutenant Mark Delaney moved faster. He rose from his seat, intercepting the deputy chief with a firm hand on his arm. His words were low but cutting. "Sit down, Tom." Maya stood firm. "You swore an oath," she said, her voice unwavering, "but you sold this badge to criminals. If we stay silent, then every one of us is guilty beside you." Her words struck deeper than the papers or the tape. Around the room, some officers blinked back tears. A few nodded faintly, as if relieved that someone had finally said what they had long suspected. Doyle shook with anger. "You have no authority. 30 years of service." "30 years is no shield," Brooks interrupted coldly. "Deputy Chief Doyle, by order of this board, you are immediately suspended pending investigation. Lieutenant Delaney, secure all materials. Sergeant Robinson, remain ready to testify under oath." The chamber erupted again, but this time the tide was turning. Reporters scribbled. Carla Jimenez adjusted her camera to capture every angle. Officer Jalen Price, once Doyle's protege, sat frozen, his hands clenched. The man he had admired was unraveling before his eyes, and the woman he had doubted was standing taller than anyone in the room. Maya felt the burn in her throat, the weight in her chest, but she did not falter. She remembered Eric Miller, his easy laugh, the trust in his eyes, the way he had said, "If anything happens, promise me you'll tell the truth." She had kept the promise. The auditorium, once prepared for routine business, now stood as a court of reckoning. And though Maya knew the fight ahead would be long, though she knew shadows still moved beyond those walls, she also knew that a single shaft of light had broken through. For the first time in months, Detroit had a reason to believe. The session did not adjourn so much as collapse. A meeting that had begun with routine reports ended with Doyle being escorted out of the auditorium, his face pale, his eyes burning with a mixture of fury and disbelief. Officers parted for him like water around a sinking ship. Some looked away, unwilling to meet his gaze. Others stared openly, as though seeing him for the first time. Lieutenant Mark Delaney carried the folder pressed tightly against his chest, as though it might vanish if he loosened his grip. Behind him, Evelyn Brooks remained at the desk, her gavel still in hand, her shoulders straight. She knew the work had only begun. Suspension was not conviction. The case had to be airtight. Maya Robinson lingered near the podium, the recorder still warm in her palm. Her heart was steady now, the tremors gone. Yet she felt no triumph. The battle had cracked open, but the war was far from won. She could already hear the murmurs, accusations of betrayal, warnings about departmental morale, whispers that maybe she had set the whole thing up. Truth is heavy, but lies are quick, and they spread with their own kind of speed. A young voice stopped Hare. "Sergeant." She turned. Officer Jalen Price stood a few feet away, his hands balled into fists at his sides. His face was a storm, anger, confusion, and something close to shame. "You didn't have to do it like that," he said, in front of everyone. "You embarrassed the whole department." Maya met his eyes. "The department embarrassed itself. I just stopped pretending." He flinched, but didn't step back. "You don't understand. Chief Doyle, he believed in me. He told me I had a future, that I could make detective in a few years if I kept my head straight." Maya's voice softened. "Jalen, I know what it's like to want someone to believe in you, but a man who sells out his badge doesn't get to shape your future. You have to decide who you want to be, not who he tells you to be." His jaw worked as though he wanted to argue, but no words came. Finally, he turned and walked out, shoulders rigid. Maya watched him go, knowing that the young officer carried more than loyalty. She had seen the tension in his eyes as Doyle lunged for the recorder. Jalen knew something. Whether he would come forward or bury it remained uncertain. Outside, the autumn wind had sharpened. Clouds pressed low, promising rain. On the steps of headquarters, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted questions. "Sergeant Robinson, Will you testify? Is Doyle connected to Leonard Russo? Are other officers involved? Maya pushed through, saying only, "No comment," until she reached her car. Her phone buzzed with messages, friends, colleagues, strangers. Some were supportive, others venomous. One text, unsigned, read simply, "Stop now, or you'll regret it." She sat for a moment with the engine off, listening to the faint hum of traffic on Jefferson Avenue. Then she drove toward Corktown, toward the diner where her mother still worked the lunch rush. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. The smell of onion, soup, and cornbread wrapped around her like a blanket. Her mother, apron tied snug, looked up from behind the counter. "Maya," she said, voice laced with both pride and worry. "I saw it on the news already. You did it." Maya lowered her eyes. "I started it. There's a difference." Her mother came around the counter and put both hands on Maya's cheeks. "Child, your father used to say, courage isn't the finish line. It's the first step. You made that step today." Maya smiled faintly. Her father had been a steel worker, a man of calloused hands and stubborn integrity. She wondered what he would think now, seeing his daughter challenge the system he had always mistrusted. Before she could answer, the bell rang again. Two men in dark jackets stepped inside. They didn't look like customers. Their eyes swept the diner, lingering on Maya. One spoke quietly to the other, then they both turned and left without ordering. Her mother's face hardened. "You be careful, Maya. Shadows don't like the light." Meanwhile, across town at the riverfront, Leonard Russo sat in a glass-walled office above the docks. The skyline of Detroit stretched beyond, gray against the water. He sipped espresso from a porcelain cup, his gold ring clinking against the handle. One of his lieutenants entered, breathless. They suspended Doyle. "That's Sergeant Robinson. She brought the file, the recordings. It's all over the news." Russo leaned back in his leather chair, untroubled. Thomas Doyle was useful, but tools break. He set the cup down carefully. The real question is whether the sergeant lives long enough to use what she has. The lieutenant shifted uneasily. "What do you want done?" Russo's smile was thin. "Nothing loud, nothing messy. Remind her that family diners burn easily. Fear is cheaper than bullets." The man nodded and slipped out. Russo returned his gaze to the skyline. For years he had moved money through city contracts, sheltered by men like Doyle. One sergeant would not undo that. Still, he admired her audacity. Courage was rare and dangerous. Back at headquarters, Lieutenant Delaney worked late in his office. The folder lay on his desk, its pages spread beneath a lamp. He knew enough of Doyle's history to feel the sting of betrayal. They had been rookies together once, partners on midnight patrols. He remembered Doyle buying coffee for homeless men on Woodward Avenue, helping push stalled cars out of intersections during snowstorms. When had he turned? When had ambition soured into greed? Delaney rubbed his temples. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A low voice came through. "Lieutenant, there are more files." Doyle wasn't working alone. "If you want them, meet me tomorrow night. Jefferson Bridge, midnight." The line went dead. Delaney sat back, staring at the dark window. The city lights flickered, distant and uncertain. At the same hour, Jalen Price sat in his apartment, his badge on the table in front of him. The television replayed clips of the day. Maya lifting the folder, Doyle shouting, the board chair's gavel slamming. Jalen muted the sound. He knew what he had seen. In his mind, he replayed a different moment 2 weeks earlier. Doyle had asked him to deliver a sealed envelope to an office downtown. Routine, Doyle had said, just paperwork. But the envelope had felt heavy, too heavy. Jalen had handed it off without asking questions. Later, he had seen the same name Russo on the evening news. Now, guilt gnawed at him. He wanted to believe Doyle had only bent the rules, not broken them. But Maya's evidence had left no room for illusion. He poured himself a drink, untouched. Then he stood, paced, sat again. The badge gleamed under the lamp. Finally, he whispered to the empty room, "What do I do?" The answer did not come, but the question itself meant the wall of silence was already cracking. That night, Maya lay awake in her small apartment. Rain tapped against the window, a steady rhythm. She thought of Eric Miller, of his last words, of the promise she had kept. She thought of the look in Jalen's eyes, torn between loyalty and truth. She thought of her mother, standing strong in the diner, even as shadows circled. Detroit was a city of battles, and tonight she felt them all personal, political, spiritual. The fight was not over. But for the first time, she believed it could be won. Morning light crept into Detroit through a veil of mist, softening the edges of the skyline. It was the kind of gray October dawn that made the city look weary, like an old fighter still standing after too many rounds. Inside her apartment, Maya Robinson stirred her coffee and scanned the headlines on her laptop. Every outlet carried the same story. Deputy Chief suspended in corruption scandal. Her name appeared in most of them, sometimes with respect, sometimes with venom. The phone buzzed, a private number. She hesitated, then answered. "You think you're a hero?" The voice was low, distorted. "Heroes get buried. Back off, Sergeant, or your mother's diner won't see another sunrise." The line clicked dead. Maya's hand tightened around the phone until her knuckles whitened. She set it down slowly, drew a steadying breath, and reminded herself of something her father used to say: "Fear has a voice. Courage has an echo. Make sure yours carries farther." She grabbed her jacket and drove to Corktown. The diner smelled of bacon and coffee, comfort in the form of scent. But the front window carried a new scar spray-painted in hurried letters: Rat. Her mother stood with a rag in her hand, scrubbing at the paint. "Mama," Maya whispered, rushing to take the cloth. Her mother shook her head. "I can handle a window. What I can't handle is my daughter walking into danger blind. These people mean what they say." "I know," Maya admitted, "but if I stop, Eric's death means nothing. Everything we stand for means nothing." Her mother studied her for a long moment, then cupped Maya's face in her weathered hands. "Then you walk careful, and you don't walk alone." Elsewhere in the city, Officer Jalen Price sat in his patrol car, engine idling. He hadn't slept much. The events of the previous day clung to him like smoke. His radio crackled with routine chatter, but his mind replayed a different voice. Doyle's smooth and commanding, telling him to deliver that envelope. He could almost feel its weight again. His partner, Officer Daniels, glanced over. "You're quiet, Price. Everything all right?" "Yeah," Jalen muttered, but the words sounded thin. He thought of Maya's eyes when she told him the department had embarrassed itself. Part of him wanted to dismiss her as self-righteous. Another part knew she was right. He felt the split inside him growing, and with it a dangerous question. What if he had evidence that could tip the scale? In a dimly lit warehouse by the river, Leonard Russo met with two of his men. A shipment of steel coils clanged in the background, masking their conversation. "She's stirring too much noise," one lieutenant said. "The papers, the board, this Robinson woman's becoming a symbol." Russo lit a cigar, the smoke curling lazily. "Symbols can be broken, but not with bullets. That makes martyrs." "Then what?" Russo smiled. "Pressure, fear, a reminder that her world can collapse around her. We'll start with the diner. Subtle at first. If she doesn't bend, then we tighten the rope." His men nodded. Russo puffed his cigar, eyes cold. For decades he had survived by staying one step ahead. He would not let a sergeant topple an empire built brick by brick. That afternoon, Lieutenant Delaney knocked on Maya's office door. He carried a manila envelope, his expression grave. "This came to me through internal channels," he said, closing the door behind him. "Anonymous tip. Bank records, more contracts, names of officers. If it's real, Doyle wasn't the only one. He had partners." Maya flipped through the documents, her stomach sinking. Some signatures she recognized, others shocked her. "This is bigger than we thought." Delaney lowered his voice. "I got a call last night. Someone wants to meet, says they have more. Midnight, Jefferson Bridge." Maya frowned. "That's a setup if I've ever heard one." "Maybe, but if it's real, we can't ignore it." She nodded reluctantly. "Then we go together." Meanwhile, Jalen sat in his apartment staring at his badge again. The television replayed news footage of Doyle being led out of the auditorium. His phone buzzed with a new message. "Keep your mouth shut, rookie. Remember who gave you your shot." No name, but he didn't need one. The words carried Doyle's shadow. He looked at the small lockbox under his bed. Inside lay a photocopy he had made out of nervous curiosity, the receipt from that envelope dropped 2 weeks earlier. He hadn't meant to keep it, but now it felt like a fuse waiting for a match. Jalen pressed his palms to his face. If he came forward, his career might end before it began. If he stayed silent, he would be complicit. The choice pressed down like a weight. That night, Maya and Delaney arrived at Jefferson Bridge. The river glistened under weak moonlight. Trucks rumbled in the distance. The city felt hushed, holding its breath. A figure emerged from the shadows, hood pulled low. He held out a flash drive. "Proof," he whispered. Doyle was part of a network. "Russo's money reached further than you think. Take it, but watch your back. They're already watching you." Before Maya could ask a question, the man turned and disappeared into the dark. Delaney slipped the drive into his pocket. We'll need to verify this, but if it's legit, Maya nodded, though unease gnawed at her. Every new piece of evidence widened the circle of enemies. As they walked back to the car, she noticed movement on the far side of the bridge, a black SUV idling, headlights off. Her pulse quickened. Delaney muttered, "We're not alone." The SUV's engine roared to life. It rolled slowly forward, then sped past them, tires spitting gravel. Maya caught a glimpse of faces inside, hard, expressionless. A warning, not an attack. For now. Later, in the quiet of her apartment, Maya sat at her desk, the flash drive glowing faintly in her laptop. Folders opened, spilling names, transactions, hidden accounts. Each revelation was another fracture in the wall of silence. Her phone buzzed again. Another private number. She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered into the empty room, "I'm not backing down." But even as she said it, she felt the weight of the storm gathering. The storm broke the next evening. Detroit rain doesn't fall gently. It lashes sideways, driven by wind off the river, soaking coats and rattling windows. Sergeant Maya Robinson sat in her unmarked sedan across from her mother's diner, watching drops chase each other down the windshield. She had finished her shift hours earlier, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. After the graffiti, after the phone call, she wanted to make sure the place stood safe through the night. Inside, the lights glowed warm. Her mother wiped down counters, humming softly. 2 regulars lingered over pie. The world looked ordinary, but Maya knew better. Ordinary could be a mask. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lieutenant Delaney. "Prelim check on the flash drive, it's real. More officers compromised. We'll meet tomorrow." Maya sighed. More names, more betrayal. She was still scrolling when the sound came, a sharp crack of glass shattering. She yerked her head up. The diner's front window spiderwebbed with fractures. A brick lay on the floor inside. Her mother froze, hand to her mouth. The 2 customers ducked. Maya slammed open her door and sprinted across the street. Tires screeched at the corner. A black sedan peeled away into the rain, taillights glowing like coals. She pushed inside, glass crunching under her boots. "Mama, are you hurt?" Her mother shook her head, eyes wide. No, I'm fine. Just scared half to death." Maya picked up the brick. A note was taped to it, the ink bleeding from rain. "Next time it won't be a brick." Her mother grabbed her arm. "Maya, this has to stop. They're not bluffing." Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. "If I stop, they win, and they'll keep winning." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "Then promise me you'll be careful. I can't lose you too." Maya hugged her tight, feeling the trembling in her mother's shoulders. She didn't promise. She couldn't. Across town, Jalen Price sat in his small apartment, blinds drawn tight. The receipt lay on the table before him, a simple slip of paper, but it might as well have been a stick of dynamite. He had delivered that envelope. He had seen the look on Doyle's face when Maya pulled out the evidence. Now he understood. He had been a pawn. The television muttered in the background, talk shows debating the scandal, callers demanding reform, commentators warning of witch hunts. Jalen muted the noise and stared at his badge. He picked up his phone. His thumb hovered over Maya's number. He imagined her voice, calm, steady, asking him to do the right thing. Then he imagined the other side, Doyle's allies, Russo's reach. A career ruined, a life endangered. The phone buzzed in his hand. A new text. "We know what you're holding. Keep it quiet, and you'll be protected. Speak up, and you're done." Jalen dropped the phone as if it burned. His chest heaved. He looked again at the badge. The decision pressed down, heavier than the storm outside. Later that night, Maya met Delaney at headquarters. The halls were quieter than usual, a hush of distrust hanging in the air. Officers avoided her eyes. Some nodded in support, others turned away. Delaney spread papers across his desk. The flash drive ties Russo's money to 3 more officers. Mid-level but important. Transfers disguised as overtime. Training funds. It's clever, but traceable. Maya leaned over the documents. Who else knows about this? Right now? Just us and the board chair. We're keeping it tight until we have more. She nodded, but unease gnawed at her. Secrets were dangerous currency. The more they held, the higher the price on their heads. Delaney studied her face. "They're targeting you, Maya. The diner, the threats, that's Russo's style. He rattles cages before he strikes." "I know," she said quietly, "but I won't back down." He gave a faint smile. "That's what scares them most." The following afternoon, Jalen walked the corridors of headquarters like a man carrying a hidden wound. Every conversation sounded sharper, every glance heavier. He passed 2 officers who stopped talking as he approached. Paranoia or reality, he couldn't tell. He found himself outside Maya's office, hand raised to knock. But before he could, her door opened and she stepped out, eyes tired but focused. "Jalen," she said, surprised. He froze, words caught in his throat. The receipt weighed like lead in his pocket. Finally, he muttered, "Just wanted to say, be careful." Then he turned and walked away before courage could find him. Maya watched him go, sensing the storm inside him but not yet knowing its shape. That evening, as dusk painted the city in bruised colors, Maya drove home along Jefferson Avenue. The rain had stopped, but puddles reflected neon and headlights. She checked her mirrors often, nerves taut. Too many stories had ended on roads like this. Near her building, a car pulled out behind her. Dark, low, unmarked. It followed through 2 turns. Her pulse quickened. She slowed at a corner, then accelerated suddenly, taking a hard left. The car followed. Maya's training kicked in. She wove through side streets, tires splashing, heart pounding. Finally, she swung into a police substation lot. The car slowed at the corner, paused, then vanished into the night. She sat gripping the wheel, breath shallow. This was no longer intimidation at a distance. They were watching her every move. Meanwhile, Russo dined in a private room above a steakhouse, his glass of wine untouched. One of his men leaned close. "She's not bending. We broke her window, chased her through the streets. She's still standing." Russo's expression didn't change. "Then we remind her of the cost. If she won't break, we'll make someone else break for her." He tapped ash from his cigar, eyes narrowing. "Everyone has a weakness. Find hers." Back in her apartment, Maya checked the locks twice, then sat at her desk with the folder and flash drive. Each page was a thread in a web too vast for one person to unravel. But she knew she wasn't alone, not anymore. Delaney believed in her. Brooks believed in her. And maybe, just maybe, Jalen Price was closer to choosing truth than silence. She whispered into the quiet room, as though to Eric Miller's memory, "I'll keep going, no matter what it costs." Outside, the city pulsed, restless and waiting. Detroit never slept, but some nights it paced restlessly, like a boxer in the corner waiting for the next round. That was how the city felt when Maya Robinson left headquarters late on Wednesday night. The streets glistened under weak street lamps, rainwater swirling into drains, sirens moaning faintly in the distance. Her phone buzzed as she unlocked her car. A new message. "You're out of time. Choose family or career." The number was blocked. Maya sat behind the wheel, staring at the words, until the screen dimmed. She could almost hear Russo's voice behind them, smooth, patient, certain of victory. Across town, in an office overlooking the docks, Leonard Russo watched the rain streak his windows. A chessboard sat before him, pieces arranged mid-game. He studied the board for a moment, then moved a black bishop with a decisive clack. His lieutenant entered. "The diner didn't scare her. The chase didn't either. She's stubborn." Russo smiled faintly. "Stubbornness is only courage until it meets consequence. We'll change tactics. She has allies. Break them, and she'll break." "And?" The lieutenant frowned. "Delaney? The board chair?" Russo shook his head. "Number, too public, too risky. The young one, Price. He's fragile, and fragile men make useful examples." Officer Jalen Price sat in his patrol car in the lot behind a grocery store, the engine idling to keep the heater running. The storm outside matched the storm inside him. In his jacket pocket, the receipt crinkled whenever he moved. Proof. A small slip of paper that could either damn him or redeem him. His phone buzzed. Another message, this one blunt. "We know what you're carrying. Hand it over, or you'll wish you had." Jalen shut his eyes. He had joined the force to protect, not to be a pawn in games of power. But fear whispered in his ear. If he stepped forward, he would lose his career, maybe even his life. He thought of Maya, standing tall in that auditorium, facing down the deputy chief in front of everyone. She had looked unshakable, but Jalen knew better. Courage didn't mean you weren't afraid. It meant you chose the harder road anyway. He gripped the steering wheel until his hands ached. "I can't do this alone," he whispered. For the first time, he considered walking into internal affairs. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, files spread around her like a paper fortress. The flash drive from the Jefferson Bridge meeting revealed more connections, construction contracts, overtime scams, even ghost employees drawing paychecks that funneled back to Russo. Every discovery widened the conspiracy. She leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her. The clock read nearly 3 a.m. Then a crash shattered the stillness. Maya bolted upright, hand on her sidearm. Glass littered the floor beneath her living room window. A rock lay among the shards, wrapped in a note. She picked it up carefully. "You've been warned. Next time, it's not the window." Maya scanned the dark street below. A car engine revved and faded into the distance. Her pulse thundered, but anger steadied her. They wanted her to back down. Instead, they had only lit the fire hotter. She called Delaney. He answered groggily. "They hit my apartment," she said. "How is it?" Then his voice hardened. "Stay put. I'll have a unit outside your door by dawn. And Maya, don't let them see you rattled. That's all they want." "I'm not rattled," she lied. The next morning, Evelyn Brooks convened an emergency session of the Oversight Board. The evidence so far pointed not only to Doyle but to a network inside the department. The weight of it pressed on every member like a stone. "We cannot afford silence," Brooks said firmly. "If this cancer is deeper than we thought, the people of Detroit deserve to know." Some board members shifted uneasily. One argued that releasing names prematurely could destroy careers. Another worried about lawsuits. Brooks silenced them with a single phrase: "Our duty is not to comfort the guilty, but to protect the innocent." Her words earned a murmur of assent. But Brooks knew, the deeper they dug, the harder the pushback would come. That afternoon, Jalen parked outside the diner. Rain had eased, leaving the streets slick. He watched through the window as Maya's mother served coffee, her shoulders straight despite the boarded-up window from the night before. Jalen sat gripping the receipt in his pocket. He thought of walking in, sliding it across the counter to Maya. He imagined her steady eyes, the relief, maybe even gratitude, but he couldn't move. Fear pinned him to the seat. His phone buzzed again. This time, the message chilled him to the bone. "We see you. Walk away, rookie." He jerked his head up. Across the street, a black SUV idled, dark windows, watching. Jalen's throat tightened. He started the car and pulled away, his decision still unfinished, his soul caught between silence and truth. That night, Maya met Delaney in a secure conference room at headquarters. The folder and flash drive sat between them. "Whoever our informant was," Delaney said, "they risked their life. These files show payments reaching into the academy, payroll, even city contracts. This isn't just Doyle, this is systemic." Maya rubbed her temples. "If it's that deep, then every move we make is being watched. Every call, every step." Delaney nodded grimly. "Which means we need allies we can trust." "Real allies." Maya hesitated. "What about Jalen Price?" Delaney studied her. "The kid's green, loyal to Doyle. You think he's ready?" "I think he's torn," Maya said quietly. "And torn men can go either way, but I've seen the doubt in his eyes. He knows something. We need him." Delaney leaned back. "Then reach him, before Russo does." Meanwhile, in his high-rise office, Russo made another move on his chessboard. He captured a white knight, smiling thinly. "Soon," he murmured. "Very soon." That night, Maya returned home to find a single envelope slipped under her door. No name, no address. Inside was a photograph, her mother leaving the diner, head down against the rain. On the back, scrawled in black ink, "One more step, and she pays your price." Maya's chest constricted. Her hands shook for the first time in weeks. She closed her eyes, whispered a prayer, then set the photo down. They had crossed the line, and now, she knew, there was no turning back. The Friday morning, sun broke through in streaks, scattering light across Detroit like a reluctant blessing. The storm had passed, but puddles clung to the streets, reflecting the city's grit. For Sergeant Maya Robinson, the morning felt heavier than the gray days that came before. The photograph left under her door haunted her. Her mother's face, unaware she was being watched, filled Maya's thoughts with dread she could not shake. At headquarters, she walked into the briefing room where Lieutenant Delaney waited with a stack of files. His tie was loose, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. "They're escalating," Maya said quietly, laying the photograph on the table. Delaney studied it, jaw tightening. "This isn't intimidation anymore. It's personal." Maya folded her arms. "Then we make it personal, too." Delaney raised an eyebrow. "Meaning? We stop waiting for their next move. We push first." Across town, Jalen Price woke to the sharp knock of fists on his apartment door. He staggered up, still groggy, and peered through the peephole. Two men in dark jackets stood in the hallway. He didn't open the door. One of them leaned close to the peephole, his voice muffled but menacing. "Morning, rookie. Don't forget where your loyalties lie." They slipped an envelope under the door before walking away. Jalen waited until silence returned, then picked it up with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph of him, sitting in his patrol car the night before, the receipt visible in his hand. On the back, the words, "We're watching." His stomach turned. He dropped into a chair, head in his hands. He was trapped. If he gave up the receipt, he would betray the truth. If he kept it, he would be hunted. He thought of Maya again, standing in the auditorium with steady eyes. He wondered how she carried the weight he could barely hold for a single day. That afternoon, Evelyn Brooks convened another closed-door meeting of the Oversight Board. Her voice was steady, but her words cut sharp. "We are not dealing with one corrupt official. We are dealing with a network police, city contracts, outside money. This is systemic, and if we hesitate, we become complicit." One member protested, "We have no guarantee the public will stand with us. If we release names too soon." Brooks silenced him with a glance. "If we wait, people will die. That's the guarantee." Maya sat in the corner of the room, watching, listening. She knew Brooks carried her own risks, political enemies, personal threats, but the woman did not flinch. Courage wasn't just in uniforms. Sometimes it lived in retired teachers turned watchdogs who refused to blink when the wolves circled. Later that night, Maya drove through the neighborhood where Eric Miller had lived. The porch light on his old house burned dim, the yard overgrown since his passing. She parked across the street, memories heavy in her chest. Eric had once told her, "Every badge is just a piece of metal until you decide what it stands for." She closed her eyes and whispered into the night, "It stands for this, Eric. It stands for fighting back." Her phone buzzed. A new text. Unknown number. "Meet me. Midnight. The old freight yard. Come alone." Maya's instincts screamed trap, but something in the wording suggested a potential ally. She forwarded the message to Delaney, who replied almost instantly, "I'll be nearby, watching." Meanwhile, Jalen sat in his darkened apartment, staring at the receipt. His phone rang. The caller ID flashed. Maya Robinson. He hesitated, then answered. "Jalen," Maya's voice came, calm but urgent. "I don't know what you're holding, but I know you have something, and I know they're leaning on you. You don't have to carry it alone." Jalen's throat tightened. "You don't understand, Sergeant. If I speak, I'm finished. They'll bury me." "They're already burying you," she said softly. "Bit by bit. Every day you stay silent. You want to be the man Eric Miller believed you could be? Then stand up, with me." The line went quiet. Jalen swallowed hard, torn. Finally, he whispered, "I'll think about it." Then he hung up. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a refusal either. Midnight at the freight yard smelled of rust and oil. Trains no longer ran here, but the skeletal remains of tracks and cars stood like monuments to a busier past. Maya moved cautiously, her flashlight sweeping across graffiti-scrawled walls. A figure emerged from behind a rusted container. Hood pulled low, hands raised. "I don't want trouble," the man said quickly. "But you need to know Russo's planning something big. A shipment this weekend. Drugs, cash, maybe both. And he's got officers scheduled to run security. Names are on this drive." He handed her a small USB stick. His hands shook. "Why help me?" Maya asked. The man glanced around nervously. "Because I know what happened to Eric Miller, and I don't want to end up like him." Before she could ask more, headlights flared at the edge of the yard. Engines roared. Maya spun, gun drawn, as two SUVs rolled in, doors slamming open. Men in dark jackets spilled out. "Run!" the informant shouted. Maya dove behind a container as gunfire cracked through the night. Bullets sparked against metal. She returned fire, controlled bursts, her heart hammering. Delaney's siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. The attackers scrambled, retreating to their SUVs. Within moments, they were gone, taillights fading into darkness. The yard fell silent except for Maya's ragged breathing. The informant was gone too, vanished into the maze of containers. Delaney pulled up seconds later, rushing to her side. "You all right?" Maya nodded, chest heaving. She held up the USB. "They didn't stop this." Delaney exhaled. "Then we've got them where it hurts." But Maya knew better. Every step forward only tightened Russo's grip. He wouldn't stop until someone broke. Back in his apartment, Jalen lay awake, the receipt still clutched in his hand. He replayed Maya's words. "They're already burying you." For the first time, he believed her. He rose, pulled on his jacket, and slid the receipt into his pocket. He didn't know if tomorrow he'd hand it to Maya, to Delaney, or to Internal Affairs. But he knew one thing. Silence was no longer an option. Detroit's Saturday morning rose cold and brittle, the kind of morning when the air stung your lungs and frost rimmed the edges of windshields. The city moved slower on weekends, but beneath the quiet streets something heavier stirred. Sergeant Maya Robinson sat with Lieutenant Delaney in a dim conference room at headquarters. Between them lay the USB drive from the freight yard, plugged into a secure laptop. The files filled the screen, shipping manifests, coded messages, and rosters of officers scheduled for weekend overtime. Delaney scrolled, his jaw tight. This isn't overtime. This is cover. They're moving something through the riverfront warehouses Saturday night. Russo's fingerprints are all over it. Maya leaned forward. What kind of shipment? Cash. Drugs. Maybe both. Whatever it is, it's big enough to buy silence from half the city. Maya's stomach tightened. Then that's where we hit him. We cut off the flow. Delaney hesitated. Careful. We're talking about officers on the payroll. If we move too soon, we'll be walking into a trap. And if we wait too long, Russo disappears with his shipment. Maya's eyes hardened. Then we find someone willing to back us. Someone outside his reach. Across town, Jalen Price walked the riverfront in his plainclothes jacket, hands shoved deep into his pockets. The cold bit through fabric, but it barely registered. His mind churned. The receipt still weighed heavy against his chest. He had almost given it to Maya the night before, but fear had held him back. Now, as he stared at the docks where cranes loomed like metal skeletons, he felt the clock ticking louder. His phone buzzed. Another message. Stay away from the warehouses this weekend. Last warning. Jalen shut his eyes. He had been warned, threatened, cornered, but warnings cut both ways. Maybe it was time Russo learned that the rookie wasn't as fragile as he thought. He turned, walking with new purpose. His steps carried him not back to his apartment, but toward headquarters. That afternoon, Evelyn Brooks sat in her living room, papers spread across her dining table. She had been in public service long enough to recognize fear when she saw it, and the city council was afraid. Calls had poured in, urging her to handle this quietly, to avoid unnecessary disruption. She pushed the papers aside and looked out her window. Detroit stretched before her streets, worn but alive, neighborhoods scarred but unbroken. She whispered to herself, if not now, when? Then she picked up her phone and called Maya. Sergeant, she said, if you move against Russo, you will not move alone. The board will stand behind you, and I will. Maya felt a lump in her throat. Thank you, ma'am. That means more than you know. Just remember, Brooks replied, the higher the truth climbs, the stronger the wind blows. Hold fast. Meanwhile, Russo's office buzzed with quiet efficiency. Men in suits moved like shadows, carrying folders, taking calls. The boss sat at the head of a polished table, sipping espresso, while his lieutenants reviewed final preparations. The trucks will move out at midnight, one said. Police escorts already scheduled. No one will question it. Russo nodded, satisfied. Good. And our friends in uniform? Paid. Ready. Russo leaned back, fingers steepled. Then by sunrise, the city will owe me more than ever. Money flows where fear holds the pipe. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. And Sergeant Robinson? A lieutenant replied, we gave her enough warnings. If she interferes, she won't live long enough to regret it. Russo tapped ash into a crystal tray. Don't underestimate her. Courage is more dangerous than bullets. Make sure she's busy, very busy. That evening, Jalen walked into Delaney's office, the receipt in hand. His face was pale but resolved. I can't carry this anymore, he said. He set the paper on the desk. 2 weeks ago, Doyle had me deliver an envelope. This is the receipt. The name on it is Russo's. I didn't understand then, but I do now. Delaney's eyes narrowed as he picked up the slip. This is gold, Price. You realize what you're doing? Jalen nodded. Yeah, I'm burning bridges I can't rebuild. Maya stepped closer, her voice gentle. You're not burning them, Jalen. You're crossing them, to the right side. For the first time in days, Jalen's shoulders eased. He met Maya's eyes, and she saw not the scared rookie but a man stepping into his own strength. By nightfall, the plan began to form. Delaney laid it out. We can't rely on every officer. Too many are compromised. So we take a small team trusted people only and hit the warehouse before the trucks roll. Brooks has agreed to bring in state investigators as backup. That way, even if Russo's men inside the department try to bury this, the evidence leaves Detroit immediately. Maya nodded. We go in quiet, we grab everything, and we get out before the rats know the trap is sprung. Jalen swallowed hard. And if they're waiting? Maya met his gaze. Then we fight, together. Midnight crept closer. The warehouse district loomed ahead, dark and silent except for the occasional rumble of a passing train. The air smelled of oil and damp concrete. Maya adjusted the strap of her vest, her weapon holstered but ready. Beside her, Delaney checked his radio. Jalen stood a few steps back, nerves etched on his face but determination in his stance. "This is it," Delaney murmured. "Once we move, there's no going back." Maya's eyes swept the shadows. "Good. I'm tired of looking back." They advanced into the dark, unaware of the eyes watching from across the street. In a parked car, one of Russo's lieutenants lifted a phone to his ear. "They're here," he whispered. "Shall we proceed?" The voice on the other end was smooth and cold. "Yes. Let them step into the storm." The warehouse loomed against the midnight sky, a hulking block of steel and shadow at the edge of the Detroit River. Broken windows gaped like missing teeth, while floodlights mounted on poles lit the yard in sickly cones of yellow. The air carried the sharp tang of diesel and the faint echo of water lapping against the docks. Sergeant Maya Robinson crouched beside Lieutenant Delaney behind a stack of rusted shipping containers. Officer Jalen Price stood on her other side, his breathing uneven but controlled. Beyond the yard's chain-link fence, 3 semi-trucks idled, their headlights dim, engines rumbling like restless beasts. Delaney checked his watch. "State investigators are staged 3 blocks out. They'll roll when we give the word." Maya scanned the lot. Shadows shifted near the trucks, uniformed men, but not all of them familiar. She recognized 1 or 2 from the department, officers who had smiled at roll call but now stood guarding Russo's cargo. The betrayal still cut. "Remember," Maya whispered, "we don't go loud unless we have to. Evidence first, confrontation second." Jalen swallowed hard. "And if they recognize us?" Maya glanced at him, her expression steady. "Then they'll have to decide who they really serve." They slipped through a gap in the fence, boots crunching on gravel. The warehouse door hung slightly ajar. Inside, the air was damp, filled with the metallic stink of rust. Stacks of crates lined the walls, labels half torn, some marked with foreign shipping codes. Maya's flashlight cut across a path. She moved cautiously, Delaney covering the flank, Jalen at the rear. Each step echoed too loudly in the cavernous space. Then they found an office tucked at the back, lights on, desk piled with ledgers and files. A laptop glowed faintly. Maya's chest tightened. This was the heart of it. Delaney moved quickly, sliding files into a bag, photographing documents with his phone. Maya copied folders onto a flash drive. Jalen stood guard at the door, his weapon drawn, nerves tight as piano wire. Suddenly, voices rose outside. The crunch of boots. A flashlight beam swept past the office window. Jalen hissed, "We've got company." Maya froze. The beam passed, but the voices lingered. Then one voice cut clear, "Check the office." The door burst open. 2 men entered, uniforms familiar but eyes cold. One froze at the sight of Jalen aiming his weapon. For a breath, recognition flickered. "Price?" the man said. "What the hell are you doing here?" Jalen's throat tightened. It was Officer Reynolds, a man he had shared patrol shifts with. "Reynolds," Jalen said, voice strained. "Step aside, don't do this." Reynolds' jaw clenched. "You don't understand. You think this city runs on justice? It runs on deals. Don't throw your life away." Delaney barked. He already made his choice. The standoff hung taut. Then Reynolds' partner lifted his gun. Instinct took over. Jalen fired once, the shot cracking like thunder. The man dropped, weapon skittering across the floor. Reynolds cursed, ducking back out the door. Shouts erupted across the warehouse. Maya grabbed the evidence bag. "Move, now!" They sprinted through the maze of crates as footsteps pounded behind them. Bullets sparked off metal, echoing like firecrackers in the cavern. Jalen's heart hammered his first shot, fired in the line of duty, and it had been at another cop. Outside, floodlights flared on, bathing the yard in blinding glare. Men swarmed from every angle Russo's soldiers, some in street clothes, some in uniform. Delaney raised his radio. "Now, bring them in!" Within seconds, sirens wailed. State police cruisers roared into the yard, lights flashing red and blue. Officers in tactical gear spilled out, weapons raised. Chaos exploded. Gunfire rattled. Shouts filled the night. Trucks revved, drivers scrambling to escape. One semi lunged forward, smashing through the fence, only to be cut off by a wall of police cars. Tires screeched. Men shouted orders. Glass shattered. Maya ducked behind a concrete pillar, returning fire when necessary. Delaney barked commands, directing the state team to secure the trucks. Jalen crouched beside her, hands shaking but grip firm. "You okay?" Maya shouted over the noise. Jalen nodded, though his face was pale. First time I fired at someone in blue. Maya's gaze was fierce. You fired at corruption, don't forget that. In the midst of the clash, a black SUV slid into the yard. Doors flew open. Men in tailored coats emerged, moving with calculated precision. Russo himself stepped out, cigar glowing faintly in the chaos. Even from a distance, his presence froze the scene. He didn't shout or fire a weapon. He simply stood, watching as if the battlefield were a chessboard he had already mastered. His eyes found Maya. He lifted his cigar in a mock salute. Then he turned, calm as a priest, and slipped back into the SUV. The vehicle peeled away, disappearing into the night. Maya's stomach churned. He hadn't come to fight. He had come to witness, to remind her that every victory was still his game. By dawn, the warehouse yard was secured. 3 trucks impounded, dozens of crates seized, multiple officers in custody. But the cost was heavy, 2 wounded, 1 critically. The betrayal stung deep. Delaney debriefed the state team while Maya sat on the back bumper of a cruiser, sweat cooling on her neck. Jalen stood nearby, silent, his face shadowed with guilt and relief. You did good tonight, Maya told him. He shook his head. I shot a cop. You shot a criminal wearing a badge, she corrected. That's not the same thing, and you saved our lives. He met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw resolve instead of fear. Delaney joined them, holding the evidence bag. We heard him tonight, but Russo's not finished. He'll come back harder. Maya nodded, staring into the pale light of morning. Then we'll be ready. The wind off the river carried the scent of diesel and smoke. Detroit was bruised, but not beaten. And neither was she. The morning after the warehouse raid, Detroit woke to headlines screaming across every front page. Police scandal widens. Truck seized in midnight sting. State investigators step in. Who really runs the department? Television anchors spoke in clipped tones, replaying shaky footage of flashing lights, armored officers, and crates being hauled into evidence trucks. Some praised the bravery of the sting, others warned of chaos within the ranks. Every story carried a photograph of Sergeant Maya Robinson, her jaw set, eyes sharp under the floodlights. Maya sat in her mother's diner, a steaming mug of coffee before her. The place was quiet, except for the low hum of the radio announcing the scandal on every station. Her mother poured refills for 2 construction workers who watched Maya with silent respect. You're on every channel, child, her mother said softly. Like it or not, people see you now. Maya stirred her coffee. Seeing me isn't the same as standing with me. Her mother laid a hand over hers. Don't underestimate this city. We've been hurt before, but we know how to rise. At headquarters, the atmosphere was brittle. Some officers nodded at Maya in passing, eyes full of something like admiration. Others turned away, whispering as she walked by. Rumors cut like knives, that she was grandstanding, that she had betrayed her own, that she was ruining the department's reputation. Jalen Price felt it most sharply. In the locker room, his name carried in muttered tones. That rookie's finished, one veteran sneered. Shot a brother officer. Doesn't matter if the guy was dirty blue, doesn't shoot blue. Jalen sat silently on the bench, the words sinking like stones. But when he lifted his head, he remembered Maya's voice in the warehouse. You shot corruption, not a cop. He held on to that truth like a lifeline. In a boardroom downtown, Evelyn Brooks faced a different storm. City council members hammered her with questions. Why involve the state? Why air our dirty laundry in public? She stood firm. Because silence is complicity. If you think the people of Detroit don't already know corruption runs in their streets, you've forgotten who you serve. The chamber erupted in argument. Some demanded her resignation. Others applauded her resolve. Brooks stood calm in the center, like a schoolteacher refusing to yield to unruly students. Meanwhile, Leonard Russo sat in his riverfront office, calm as ever. The city's panic nothing more than background noise. His lieutenant placed a newspaper on the desk. Russo glanced at it, then folded it neatly aside. They think they've won, Russo murmured, but they don't understand cutting a branch doesn't kill the tree. What's our next move? The lieutenant asked. Russo lit a cigar. We remind them who holds the roots. The city's economy runs through my hands. Contracts, shipments, payoffs. They can raid one warehouse. I have 20 more. But most of all, we show them their crusade has a cost. His eyes narrowed, the smoke curling around his words. Target their allies, break their circle, make them bleed, trust. That night, Maya attended a private debrief with Delaney and state investigators. The evidence from the warehouse confirmed everything. Russo's empire was intertwined with city contracts, police overtime, and shipping routes. "It's enough to indict him," one investigator said. Delaney shook his head. "Enough to try. But you know how this works. He's insulated. Shell companies, middlemen. The closer you get, the slipperier he becomes." Maya leaned forward. "Then we need more. Witnesses. Someone inside his circle willing to talk." Everyone's eyes turned to Jalen. He stiffened, the weight heavy on his shoulders. "I've given you the receipt. I fired on one of my own. What more do you want?" Maya's gaze softened. "We want you to be safe, Jalen. But the truth is, you saw more than any of us. You carried their errands. Faces, places. You could break this wide open." Jalen looked away, his throat tight. He wasn't ready to answer. 2 days later, retaliation struck. The diner's front door was kicked in during the night. Chairs overturned, glass shattered, walls sprayed with red paint. Traitor. Maya's mother discovered it at dawn, tears burning in her eyes as she called her daughter. Maya rushed over, fury boiling. "They crossed the line," she growled. Delaney arrived minutes later. "They want you rattled. They want you emotional." "They got it," Maya snapped. Now we hit back harder. At headquarters, pressure mounted. The chief caught between loyalty and survival called Maya into his office. His words were measured, but his meaning sharp. "Sergeant Robinson, your work has drawn national attention. Some see it as heroic, others as reckless. For the good of this department, I'm ordering you to stand down until the investigation concludes." Maya's eyes narrowed. "You want me silent. I want stability," the chief said flatly. "And right now, you're a lightning rod." Maya stood, voice steady. "With respect, sir, stability built on lies isn't stability, it's rot." She left before he could answer. That evening, Jalen found himself walking alone through Greektown, neon signs buzzing above him, the air thick with fried food and cigarette smoke. A black SUV eased alongside the curb. The window rolled down. Russo's voice drifted out, smooth as velvet. "Officer Price." "A word?" Jalen froze. Russo smiled faintly. "You're young. You've got a future. Don't throw it away chasing someone else's crusade. Hand over what you know and I'll make sure you're protected. Promotions, money, safety. All yours." Jalen's hands trembled. "And if I don't?" Russo's smile vanished. "Then you'll learn what it means to be alone in a city that forgets its heroes." The SUV rolled away, taillights glowing red. Jalen stood rooted on the sidewalk, his heart pounding. For the first time, he understood the full reach of the man they were fighting. That night, Maya sat in her apartment, exhaustion pressing on her bones. She stared at the shattered photograph frame she had rescued from the diner, her and Eric Miller, smiling in better days. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jalen. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, I've made my choice." Maya's chest tightened. She didn't know if his choice meant hope or disaster. Either way, tomorrow would change everything. The next morning dawned cold and clear, the kind of brittle autumn day when the air felt sharper than glass. Maya Robinson sat at a corner table in her mother's diner, sipping coffee gone lukewarm. Her nerves hummed like a live wire. She hadn't slept, replaying Jalen's message over and over. "I've made my choice." The bell over the door jingled. Jalen stepped inside, his shoulders hunched, his eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. He glanced around nervously before sliding into the booth across from her. "You sure this place is safe?" he asked. Maya gave a faint smile. "If Russo's people wanted me gone, they've had plenty of chances. For now, it's safe enough." Jalen set a folded envelope on the table. His hands trembled slightly. "This is everything. Notes I kept, copies of assignments Doyle gave me, names, addresses. I didn't even realize how much I was holding until I put it all together." Maya stared at the envelope, then lifted her gaze to him. "You understand what this means?" "Yeah," he said, voice rough. "It means I'm done running. If I go down, at least I go down standing for something." A weight lifted from Maya's chest. For the first time since Eric Miller's death, she felt a glimmer of true hope. They drove to Lieutenant Delaney's office together. Delaney spread the documents across his desk, his expression hardening as he read. "This connects Doyle's orders directly to Russo's money flow," Delaney said. "It proves the network inside the department wasn't just negligence, it was deliberate." Jalen rubbed the back of his neck. "So now what? We give it to Internal Affairs?" Delaney shook his head. "IA's compromised. If we funnel this through the wrong hands, it disappears before sunset." Maya spoke quietly but firmly. "Then we take it higher. Federal, FBI, maybe even Justice Department. Russo can't bribe everyone. Delaney hesitated. That's a dangerous play. It makes this bigger than Detroit, and it puts targets on our backs the size of skyscrapers. Maya met his eyes. We already have targets. At least this way, the truth has a chance. News of the warehouse raid still churned through the city. Talk radio blared with arguments. Some called Maya a hero. Others accused her of tearing the department apart. Commentators debated whether Detroit could ever trust its own police again. Russo watched it all from his penthouse suite overlooking the river. He swirled a glass of whiskey, calm as stone, while his lieutenants fretted. She's pushing for federal involvement, one said. If that happens... Russo cut him off with a flick of his hand. If that happens, we adapt. But first, we remind them that every move has a cost. Robinson has family. Delaney has old debts. Price. He's still a child, trying to wear a man's badge. We find the crack, and we push. His voice lowered. They think they can climb out of the pit. They'll learn the walls are higher than they know. That evening, Evelyn Brooks met Maya, Delaney, and Jalen in a quiet church basement on the west side. The old pews creaked, and the smell of candle wax lingered. This is the last safe place I could think of, Brooks said. Half the city is listening to Russo's whispers, but these walls have seen worse storms. They laid the evidence out on a long wooden table, files, receipts, Jalen's notes. Brooks studied it all, her face solemn. This is enough, she said finally. If we get this into federal hands, they'll have no choice but to act. Maya nodded. Then we move fast. Russo knows we're close. Jalen shifted uneasily. He already came to me, offered protection, money, rank, said I'd be alone if I didn't take it. Brooks looked at him sharply. And what did you say? I said no, Jalen whispered. But I don't know how long I can keep saying it. Maya reached across the table, resting her hand over his. You've already done more than most. You're not alone, Jalen. Not anymore. For a moment, the young officer's eyes steadied, but safety was fleeting. As they left the church, headlights flared at the end of the block. A car sped toward them, engine roaring. Maya shoved Jalen aside as gunfire erupted, bullets shattering the quiet night. Glass burst from the church windows. Splinters flew. Delaney fired back, his pistol cracking sharp against the roar. The car swerved, tires squealing, and vanished into the dark. Maya's ears rang. Jalen lay on the ground, shaken but unhurt. Brooks clutched her arm where a graze bled shallow. They're done sending warnings, Maya said grimly. Next time, they won't miss. Hours later, Maya stood alone in her apartment, staring out at the city lights. Her reflection stared back in the glass. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, a badge that suddenly felt heavier than steel. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Last chance. Walk away, or your mother walks first. Her stomach dropped, rage rising in its place. She picked up the phone and called Delaney. We're not waiting anymore, she said. Tomorrow we go public, all of it. We hand everything to the feds in front of the cameras. No more shadows, no more whispers. Delaney's voice was low. That's war, Maya. She stared into the dark city. It already island. Meanwhile, Jalen sat in his apartment, shaking hands wrapped around a glass of water. The fear hadn't gone, but beneath it, something else had taken root. Resolve. For the first time, he felt like a cop who belonged to his badge, not to the man who had once dangled promises. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Maya. I'll stand with you tomorrow, whatever comes. He hit send before doubt could take it back. Across the riverfront, Russo stood on his balcony, watching the city lights shimmer across the water. His lieutenant approached cautiously. They're moving tomorrow. Federal handoff, cameras, press, the whole city watching. Russo smiled coldly. Good. Let them gather. A storm looks most impressive just before it breaks. He lifted his glass in a silent toast to the city below. Tomorrow, they'll learn what power really island. Sunday morning broke with a restless sky. Clouds rolled low over Detroit, bruised with the color of steel. The streets buzzed with anticipation. Rumors had spread that a major announcement was coming from the Police Oversight Board. Reporters gathered outside headquarters, their cameras already pointed at the podium set up near the steps. Inside, the atmosphere was taut. Evelyn Brooks stood firm at the head of a small conference room, a folder clutched in her hands. Lieutenant Delaney adjusted his tie, his jaw tight. Jalen Price paced like a caged animal, while Maya Robinson stood by the window, scanning the street below. This is it, Brooks said. We release everything, documents, recordings, names. Once it's public, it can't be buried. Delaney frowned. Russo won't sit quiet. He'll strike back. Maya turned from the window. Then let him. We're done hiding. Jalen stopped pacing. His face was pale but determined. He tried to buy me. He tried to scare me. Today, he learns neither worked. Oh. Brooks studied them each in turn, then gave a short nod. Then let's finish this. By mid-morning, the steps of headquarters were crowded. Reporters jostled for position. Curious citizens gathered, murmuring, some skeptical, others hopeful. Police officers ringed the perimeter, their faces unreadable. Brooks stepped up to the podium first. Her voice carried, steady and sharp. For too long, corruption has poisoned this department and this city. Today, that ends. We have uncovered undeniable evidence tying Deputy Chief Thomas Doyle and others within our ranks to Leonard Russo's criminal network. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked furiously. Maya stepped forward, holding up a thick folder. Inside this file are bank records, contracts, and recordings. Evidence collected not only by investigators, but by officers who refused to stay silent. Officers like Sergeant Eric Miller, who gave his life pursuing the truth. And officers like Jalen Price, who stood up when it could have cost him everything. Jalen's throat tightened, but he moved to stand beside her. The cameras caught it, the young rookie aligning himself with the whistleblower. Brooks continued, "These documents will be handed directly to federal authorities in full view of the public. No more secrets, no more shadows." The crowd erupted, some cheering, others shouting questions. Reporters surged forward. For a moment, it felt like victory. Then the gunfire started. A crack split the air, followed by screams. People scattered, ducking behind cars, dropping cameras. Officers drew weapons, shouting commands. Maya instinctively shielded Brooks, pulling her down behind the podium. Delaney dragged Jalen to cover. Bullets pinged off the stone steps, shattering glass in the building's facade. Across the street, a black SUV screeched to a halt. Doors flung open, men in dark coats firing toward the podium. "Russo's men," Delaney shouted, returning fire. The square exploded into chaos. Sirens wailed as backup units scrambled. Reporters dove for safety, their live feeds capturing every second of the assault. Maya's mind raced. This wasn't a warning, this was an execution attempt. If they lost the evidence here, in front of the cameras, Russo would still win. She clutched the folder tight. "We can't lose this," she shouted to Jalen. "I'll cover you," he yelled back, firing at the advancing gunman. His hands shook, but his aim was steady. Maya sprinted toward the steps, bullets sparking around her. She dove behind a patrol car, heart hammering, then pressed forward toward the line of federal agents who had just arrived. She shoved the folder into the hands of a stunned agent. "Get this inside," she barked. "Now." The agent bolted into the building, clutching the evidence. Relief surged through Maya, but the battle was far from over. Russo's SUV pulled up at the far end of the square. The man himself stepped out, calm amid the chaos. He lit a cigar as his men fired. His eyes found Maya across the square, and he lifted the cigar in that same mocking salute he had given at the warehouse. Fury flared in Maya's chest. She raised her weapon and advanced, determination hardening every step. Jalen moved with her, covering her flank. "We can't let him slip away again." Delaney's voice shouted through the din. "Stay alive, both of you." Gunfire cracked. Maya and Jalen pressed forward, ducking behind concrete barriers, returning fire. Russo's men fell back, disciplined but outnumbered as more federal agents swarmed the scene. Russo didn't flinch. Even as bullets chewed the pavement near him, he stood like a man untouchable. Finally, with a calm wave of his hand, he signaled retreat. His men pulled back, piling into SUVs. Engines roared, tires screeched, and within seconds they were gone. The square was left smoking, littered with shell casings and shattered glass. Silence fell, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the static of radios. Maya stood in the wreckage, chest heaving, her weapons still raised. Jalen leaned against a pillar, his face pale, sweat streaking his brow. "We did it," he said hoarsely. "The feds have the files." Maya lowered her weapon slowly. "Yeah, but Russo's still out there." Delaney joined them, his sleeve torn, a graze bleeding along his arm. He gave a grim smile. "For once, he's the one running." Brooks stepped forward, shaken but unbowed. The whole city saw this. They saw the truth handed over. They saw who fired first. Russo can't spin this anymore. Maya looked out over the square, reporters crawling back with cameras, citizens whispering, officers standing in stunned silence. For the first time, she felt the tide shift. That night, the news exploded. Footage of the shootout played on every channel, every network. Images of Maya shielding Brooks, of Jalen firing back with steady resolve, of federal agents hauling evidence inside these became symbols. Commentators called it a turning point. Citizens flooded social media with messages of support. Others demanded Russo's head on a plate. And still, in the quiet corners of the city, fear lingered. Russo was wounded but not finished. His empire stretched deep, his resources vast. Maya knew it. Delaney knew it. Jalen knew it. But so did Russo. In his penthouse, Russo poured another glass of whiskey. His hand trembled slightly for the first time. He watched the news replay the footage of his failed strike. "They've turned the city," his lieutenant muttered. "The people are with them now." Russo's eyes narrowed. People forget quickly, and power doesn't vanish overnight. But yes, we underestimated her. Oh. He raised his glass, whispering to himself, "Robinson, Price, Delaney, Brooks, you've won the crowd, but the game isn't finished." Back at the diner, Maya sat with her mother, Jalen, and Delaney. The window was boarded up, the chairs mismatched, but the air carried a warmth stronger than comfort food. Her mother clasped her hand. "You've carried more than most could bear, and you're still standing." Maya exhaled slowly. "We all are. But it's not over. Not until Russo's behind bars." Jalen leaned forward. "Then that's what we do next. We don't just defend, we finish it." Delaney nodded, his eyes tired but resolute. "Agreed. He made his move in public. That was his mistake. Now we take the fight to him." The four sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the day pressing down. Outside, the city pulsed with restless energy. Detroit had seen another storm, but the dawn promised something new hope. Maya looked at her team, at the mismatched circle that had chosen truth over fear, and she whispered, half to herself, half to Eric Miller's memory, "We're coming for him." The city was different now. You could feel it in the air, in the way people talked at corner stores and diners, in the way reporters lingered on the courthouse steps. The name Leonard Russo was no longer whispered in fear, it was shouted in headlines, dissected in editorials, cursed openly in the neighborhoods he once controlled. But for Maya Robinson, it wasn't over until he stood before the law. Weeks after the shootout, a federal task force swept through Russo's empire. Warehouses seized, bank accounts frozen. Politicians and officers once thought untouchable dragged into custody. It was the kind of crackdown Detroit hadn't seen in decades. And yet, Russo himself remained at large, slipping through raids like smoke. One gray morning, Maya received a call. "We've got a lead," Delaney said. "Old dockyard on the East River. Russo's cornered." Her heart quickened. "I'm on my way." The dockyard was quiet, wind whipping through broken chain link. Federal agents formed a perimeter, rifles ready. Inside an abandoned office, Russo sat alone, a cigar between his fingers, the river churning behind him. Maya entered with Jalen at her side, Delaney close behind. She had expected anger, defiance. Instead, Russo looked tired. "You win," he said softly, almost amused. "The city loves a good story, the brave sergeant, the rookie who found his conscience, the watchdog who wouldn't blink. A perfect script." "This isn't a story," Maya replied. "It's justice." Russo's eyes gleamed. "Justice? Look around you. My money built half this city. My hands fed men who would have starved without me. I gave order to chaos, and now you want to tear it down, leave nothing but ashes." Jalen stepped forward, voice firm. "Order built on fear isn't order, it's chains. You didn't build this city, you bled it." End of 2. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Russo laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "Maybe so, but remember this, people forget. Today you're heroes, tomorrow you'll be obstacles in someone else's way." Maya leveled her gaze at him. "Maybe, but today, we do what's right." Delaney gestured, and agents moved in, cuffing Russo's hands behind his back. For the first time, the man who had ruled Detroit's shadows bowed his head, no longer untouchable. The trial took months, but the outcome was certain. With the mountain of evidence, with Jalen's testimony and Maya's relentless pursuit, the jury delivered its verdict, guilty on every count. When the sentence was read, life without parole, the city exhaled. Maya sat in the back of the courtroom, Eric Miller's widow beside her, tears in her eyes. She thought of Eric, of his final request. "Promise me you'll tell the truth." She had kept the promise. Life moved on. The diner's windows were replaced, the word traitor painted over with fresh colors. Customers came not only for food but to shake Maya's mother's hand, to thank her for raising a daughter who stood tall. Jalen earned quiet respect, no longer the rookie haunted by doubt but the officer who had chosen courage over silence. Delaney, though grayer and more worn, walked with the steady pride of a man who had finally helped clean the house he had sworn to protect. And Maya, she found herself walking the city streets not as a symbol, but simply as a cop doing her job, the way it was meant to be done. She still carried the memory of fear, of threats, of shattered glass, but she also carried something stronger, the knowledge that one voice, joined by others, could pierce the darkest silence. On a crisp morning in late November, Maya stood at Eric Miller's grave. Leaves rustled in the trees above, and the sky stretched clear. She laid a hand on the headstone, her voice low. "We did it, Eric. Not just me, all of us. The truth's out. The city's got a chance now." She closed her eyes, letting the quiet sink in. Then she whispered, "Thank you for believing." When she turned to leave, Jalen waited a few steps away, hands in his pockets. He gave her a small smile. "Ready for coffee? My treat." Maya nodded. "Yeah, let's go." They walked back toward the car together, two officers bound not just by a badge, but by the choices they had made when the city needed them most. Epilogue. Detroit did not change overnight. No city ever does. Corruption left scars that would take years to heal, but something had shifted. People talked more openly about accountability. Young recruits entered the academy, inspired by a sergeant who had stood against the tide. Citizens who once shrugged at headlines began to believe their voices mattered. The lesson lingered. Justice is never easy, never clean, never quick, but it is worth the fight. And as long as there were people willing to risk comfort for truth, the city would always have a chance. My dear friends, if you've stayed with me until the very last moments, surely your heart has gone through a whirlwind of emotions: surprise, anger, compassion, even a lump in your throat at the choice made by the black female police officer. What do you think about her action? Was it admirable courage or a risky recklessness? If you were in her place, what would you do? Leave your comment below. If you believe that justice must be protected by the truth, press 1. If you feel there are still mysteries left unsolved, press 0. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you too will always stand on the side of justice, even though the path to the truth is never easy.